So tell me what you're thinking of.
Here we are. We should be live. Hi everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And actually let me know in the chat where you are, where you're watching this from, what country, what city. I would love to know where you're watching from. Thanks everyone for being here. I see there's few people already. We will wait a few more minutes because I know there's a lot more people joining tonight. But yeah, so from Zlovovic from Serbia. Hi, nice to see you here. My hometown is fairly close to Serbia. No, not super close, but I guess you may know it. It's called Trieste. It's the border city between Italy and Slovenia. And I know there's a lot of people passing there to go around. YK2 official says he's watching from Stockholm, Sweden. Wow. Thanks to be here. Thanks to be here on your afternoon. On my night, it's 9:35 p.m. here. All right, so my friend Deepin from Canada. Hi, it's been a long time since last time we spoke. Bartosz from Poland. We have quite a bit of representative. I guess the only people that may not be able to join tonight are the people from Australia because of the time zone. But I think we have quite a representative of basically everyone else. Just before we start, very quickly, two things I want to mention. The first one is that if you guys follow me also on my for my blogs, you know that I blog and post the articles on the Dev2 platform, and we are about to cross the 100,000 views on the articles. So I just wanted to kind of celebrate in advance because we are like 99,800 views or something like that. So almost 100,000 views. Second thing, and then we start, is that yesterday I sent out the monthly newsletter from the channel. And I noted quite a few people haven't received that. And it's not that you haven't received it, but check the spam folder, because I've been told by the provider of the newsletter that they changed the IP addresses they are sending a newsletter from. And so those IP addresses are still in kind of warm-up stage, so they may have been put in the spam. So check the spam folder if you haven't received the newsletter yet. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, or you're not yet part of the newsletter, try and go to coderdave.io/newsletter. I just put the link in the chat if you wanna do that, and subscribe to the newsletter. And I will be resending the monthly newsletter to all the new subscribers and to the people that haven't received it or for some reason haven't been able to open it. So go and subscribe tonight. Is the last chance for you to get the newsletter of the month. With that said, I think we can start. So what I want to do tonight is walk you through how you can deploy from Azure DevOps to AKS, or for what matters, basically any other Kubernetes, because the procedures are basically the same. And I want to do that from scratch. I will point a number of things out during the live, and this is how I would do this for a client. And I want to really walk you through all the steps. So I will start from scratch, and I will explain everything as we go. So let me switch to the screen. One more thing before we start is that I'm not sure I will be able to see the chat all the time. So if you do have any question, feel free to ask in the chat, but I may not be able to answer straight away. I will check the chat from time to time. So bear with me, because I only have two screens, so I need to have a few other things on the screen. So I'll try to take a look at the chat from time to time, but I may not be able to see it continuously. So let me jump to the screen. Yep. All right. So let's set up the stage. So what do we have? We have Azure DevOps here, this project, and I'll leave this for last because I want to explain a few things here. I do have the code for the application, and I'm hosting it on GitHub, because at the end of the stream, you will be able to go to this repo. This repo is public. And at the end of the stream, you will have the full YAML template, the full YAML pipeline for this deployment that we are going to build together. So you can reference that if you decide to do so. So mark down this repo. You also find a link in the video description if you want to reference that afterwards. What I have here is just a simple application. In my case, it's a .NET Core application, but it's just because I'm more familiar with .NET, but this, of course, will work with any other kind of application. We do have a Docker file for containerizing the application, and I do have some very simple Kubernetes deployment files that I want to show you right here. We have a deployment. Since I have a lot of imagination, I decided to call this app sample app. And this deployment just takes the container that we are going to publish and publish it on Kubernetes, on AKS. And we do have a service to just expose that application because it's a ASP.NET application, so it's a web application. This is all I have over here. So apart from that, I do have already created the Kubernetes, the AKS cluster, the Kubernetes cluster in Azure. For sake of time, the cluster creation may take a little bit of time, so I've already created. But as you can see, I have only the system deployments. And also, if you look at the pods, I only have the system pods running, so the application is not running yet, is not being deployed. And I also have an Azure Container Registry already created, but once again, this is completely empty, and we will use this to to push the image we are going to build for the application. That we need a container registry to host our image, and I decided to do so because in Azure Container Registry, because we are on Azure and I want to do that, it's easier. But that would work, as I mentioned before, basically with any Kubernetes service and any container registry that you want to use. So going back to our Azure DevOps, this project is basically empty at the moment. You can see that I do not have anything in the repo because, as I mentioned, my code is in GitHub. I don't currently have any pipeline over here, and same for environments. But what I do have, the only thing I've already created are the service connections, and we do have the service connection to my GitHub user, so I'll be able to pull the code from GitHub. And I created already the service connection for my Azure Container Registry and for my Kubernetes cluster. I did so because it contains the secrets. I didn't want to show the secret during the live stream, but all you have to do to create that, you just go to new service connection, and you go to GitHub for the GitHub account. You go to Docker registry, and then you select Azure Container Registry if you want to create the service connection for that. And then you can go to Kubernetes, and again, you can switch between subscription, service account, kubectl, etc., and you create the service connection to your Kubernetes cluster. So basically, those three things are all I have at the moment for these live stream. So without further ado, let's go to pipelines and create a new pipeline. So of course, the goal for me tonight will be to get the code we have in GitHub and have that at the end of the day, the application running into my AKS cluster. But I want to do it as if it was a real application. So I don't want to just deploy it and whatever. I want to guide you through the thought process I would have when deploying a real application on a production cluster. So first of all, we go on the GitHub because is where my my code is, and that of course asks for permissions. We take the deploy to AKS repo that is where I have my code. And so first thing here, if you know or if you see, we do have these deployed to Azure Kubernetes Service, which basically would set up almost everything I'm gonna do tonight. The reason why I don't wanna use this is because, as I mentioned a few times already, I wanna walk you through all the steps that are needed so you do understand what is needed and why we do what we do. If I would use this one, everything will be created. There would be a few things to change because it's not everything as I like it and as I would do in a production scenario, but we will lose all the reasoning behind the scenes. So this is why I'm not gonna start with this template, but I'm gonna start with just building the Docker image for my application. And as you can see, it already identified that my Docker file is in the app folder, and we do have this Docker file over here. So it's in the build source directory and app/Docker file. So I would use that Docker file. And of course, this creates the pipeline for me. And this pipeline, as I mentioned, just builds the Docker image. but there are a few things I wanna change here before, of course, saving it. So we already have the tag for our image, and I'm okay using the build ID. But what I want to do is also parameterize the image name or the repo name. I would call image repo, and we call it just sample app. And this is something I recommend to everyone. Whenever you have like hard-coded things, like the name of an app or the name of an image or anything like that, do create variables, because you never know if you need to change later on. It's much easier to change the variable rather than changing every instance of the name, basically. This created for us already the stages. This is a build stage, and it's building the image. Of course, it's a job, so we don't have to check out the code because it's checking out the code automatically by itself. It's running this on Linux, and I'm okay with that. The Docker file is already here. What I want to do here, though, is not just building this image, but I want to build and push it to my container registry. So I'm gonna modify what we have over here. I'm changing this from build to build and push. And I'm going to select here the container registry service connection that I've created before and I've shown you. I'm going to use here the variable that I just add. So that will be, what did I call it? Image repo. And this will identify the container repository in the container registry. I'm going to use the full path, as I mentioned before, for the Docker file. And I'm also going to add the latest tag. Now, if you know me and if you've seen any other of my videos, you know that I hate using the latest tags for container images for many different reasons, and we can talk about this in a while if you wish. So let me know in the chat if you want me explain why I don't use the latest. But for the time being, there's a reason why I need to use latest, and I'll talk about that in a second. We will get rid of this in a later stage. So, and basically I'm gonna change that task before with this build and push. So another thing I would need to know, so with this, we will be able to build our image and push our image to the container registry. So next thing I need to do is deploy this to Kubernetes, right? So I don't want to do it in the same stage. I want to do it in a separate stage because I want to be able to repeat the stage, for example, if anything goes wrong. So I'm gonna add, let me copy just this part because I don't wanna write it all. I'm gonna add this new stage called deploy. We can call it deploying on dev. And of course, we need to specify that this stage depends on the previous stage. Otherwise, they will run in simultaneously. And in here, of course, we have the jobs. And we also, so the job would be probably something like, job deploy. We can call it, for example, deploy to AKS. And let me check. We of course need the pool and VM image. We can use the same we used before, which is Ubuntu latest, and then we have the steps. Right. Why? Because this should be oops. I hate the indentation of YAML. I guess we can all agree that YAML is too picky. Right, so what do I need for deploying? Well, I need a few things. First of all, I need to have the manifests, right? And I do have my manifests in here. But the deployment and the service YAML manifests for Kubernetes. But I don't want to access my repo directly from this job because this is a deployment job. And notice that I use, again, a normal job, and I'll explain that in a second. But again, as I said before, I want to do it gradually. So just use a normal job for the time being. So as I mentioned, I don't want to access the repo because this is just a deployment job. The logic here would be that the CI jobs can access the repo and access external resources if needed. But when you go to deployment jobs or to jobs that take care of the continuous deployment, they should never access the external resources or especially the repo. So to avoid that, what I need to do is adding one more step over here, and I need to grab these manifests that we have in the repo and publish them in order to be available for the other jobs. The way to do so is using the artifact, where is it? Not the download, but the publish pipeline artifact task. And we need to tell them that this task that we want to grab all the files in the Kubernetes. As you've seen before, everything I have is in the Kubernetes folder. One small tip here, you can see that if you want to access the sources the sources folder in your pipelines, you can either use this syntax over here with build.source directory, or you can use the pipeline.workspace/s. The two things are equivalent. They point to the same folder basically. So I can use any of those. And let me think. The target path is this one. The artifact name, we can call it manifests, and that's it. So I can just add this task over here. And what this will do, basically will take the content of the Kubernetes folder. So in my case, those two YAML files that are the manifest for deploying into Kubernetes, and this task will publish these artifacts or this YAML file as an artifact and made them available to any other stage after this stage with the name manifest. And therefore, since we have it over here, next thing we have to do would be to download the artifacts in this stage. So once again, we can search for download here, and we have download pipeline artifacts. We can use, of course, we should use the same name. And we perhaps want to download it in a path that we know, and we call it manifests. All right, so we download it in the folder with the same name. We go here and we can add it. All right, so with this trick, with this technique, now we have the YAML files published from our build step and made available to our deploy step. So, and remember, we do have the image already in our container registry. Or when we execute this, we will have that available. So let me think. The other thing we need to do is to deploy, of course, using those manifests. To do so, we go again over here. We use the deploy to Kubernetes task. And we do use the deploy action at the moment. It's fine. We select the service connection. Remember, this is the service connection, as I said before, that I've created for this, for my cluster. The namespace is I want to deploy to the default namespace, just because of. And we leave this, let's call it replace me. And we leave everything else out here like this. So, and I'll explain in a second why I want to do this. So now we do have our deployment. The only thing we need to do is replace this with the actual manifest that we have in here. So what I can do, I can get rid of these. And oops. And with this, because I have two manifest files, I can specify one is called service.yaml and the other one is deployment.yaml. So it's deployment.yaml and the other one is service.yaml. This little thing over here, the pipe, means that basically tells the YAML pipelines this is a multi-line field. So I can specify both of the deployments, both of the manifests in the same parameter. So we do have here basically what we need. There is one more thing that you need to pay attention to. So if you remember, I've shown you in Azure, and we can go here. We have the AKS cluster, the Kubernetes cluster, and then we have our Azure Container Registry, where we will host the image. The one thing that most of the people forget about when they try to deploy is that Azure Container Registry is a private container registry. And that means that the Kubernetes cluster must have some credentials to be able to access the container registry and consume the images. This is a very important step because most of the time people will try and deploy and it fails, and the failure is because of the missing credential. There are different ways to do so. What I like to do is keeping things separate. So I would normally create a secret for Kubernetes in a different step and then try deploy. And this is what I want to do now. So I want to again use this Kubernetes, and the action type I want to select is create secret. And I'm going to use again this cluster service connection. The namespace is default. The type of secret is a Docker registry. Azure Container Registry is basically a Docker registry. We can call it how we want it. Let's use a variable for this. Let's call it, I don't know, ACR secret. And I'm planning to use this later in other stages. So, in other jobs. So what I will do is adding here a variable, and in here I'll add these, and let's call it I don't know, what if let's call it something like this. I've seen there is a question, and is why not use the environment? This is a good question, and as I mentioned before, I didn't mention it before, but I will use it later. I wanted to have gradually build all the things we need and explain step by step why I do the things I do. So I'm starting with the basic scenario, just using normal jobs, and then in the next step, when we have these deployed for the first time, I will add on top of this and add the environments and so on and so forth. So I wanted to be gradual and explain everything step by step because we're starting from scratch here. There's MJ Sabito from the Philippines. Hello. There's another guy from Poland. Glad to have you all guys here. Okay, so where was I? We've created the variable with the name for our secret. This will create our secret. And of course, we need the Docker registry service connection. And once again, we can use the container registry connection that I've created before. When I add this in here, this will create a secret, a Kubernetes secret inside the AKS cluster. And being this a Docker registry type of secret, whenever the AKS cluster will need to pull an image from my K8s examples ACR, my Azure Container Registry, will have the authentication data, the authentication credentials for that ACR. I'm just double checking that I haven't forgotten anything, but we should have everything we need. So if we go back, let me get rid of these, I don't like that. So this trigger on CI, we have the two variables for the image repo name and the tag for that image. And we create the Docker image, we build the image, we tag it as latest, and I will explain while it builds why I've done that. We publish the manifest as artifacts, so we are able to consume them in the deployment stage that depends obviously on build. And the deployment stage will download the manifests, will create a secret in Kubernetes to be able to authenticate to the Azure Container Registry, and then we'll deploy the application using the deployments files. Let me save and run. So this will start building, and then I will explain you a couple of more things. So this is creating the pipeline, and in fact, it's creating it on GitHub. So if I go over here, you'll see that it just created the YAML pipeline file in here. And so this should start building in a moment. I'm not sure why it's taking this long. Okay, so this is building. I have the kubectl open here. This will point to that cluster, and you'll see that there's no cluster at the moment. Let's put it in watch mode, so we will see if anything changes. And what is that? Should be like this. So this is building the image. Let me go back to the pipeline, and I want to explain two things here. First of all is, as I mentioned, why I'm using the latest tag. The reason why I'm using the latest tag is because in this moment, what I'm relying on is this deployment manifest. And as you can see here, I don't have a tag for that image in here, because the substitution in here would be quite complex to do, and we will do that later in a different way. So the only thing I can do is take in the latest image from the registry, from the image repository. So that's why I'm using latest, even though I don't like using latest, because if you use the latest and you publish a new version of the application with latest, and your cluster for any reason needs to pull another image, it may pull the wrong image. It may pull the new version, for example, or a different version of the application, and you don't have control over that. So this was the first thing. Second thing is why I'm creating the secret in a different step and before actually deploying the application. I'm doing so because if the secret creation fails, there's no point in deploying, because the deployment will be failing because there's no credentials for AKS to connect to the Azure Container Registry. So I want to be able to deploy only if this doesn't fail. If I do altogether, it skips even on failure and may try to deploy, and I will let the feedback just too late or later. If I do it in two different steps, that will be immediate. Let me go back to here. So our build image is done. Now it's deploying. Let me see if there's anything in the chat in the meantime. Zubair said he is connecting from Australia. So I was wrong. We do have people from Australia. I thought there would not be people because of the time zone. There is someone else. I will take a look at that in a moment. And we see that our container is, our pod is now running. So this means that being running means that the secret creation went well, and the deployment went well as well. And in fact, now it's completed. So as you can see, we do have also one artifact. And in fact, this artifact is the YAML files that we've published as a result of the build. If I go back here, you can see that now I do have if this loads, and I have the sample app repository, and I have both the 154 image and the latest one. So this has worked as we've seen. And if we want to double proof, is I can go in the workloads, and you can see that I have the sample app deployment and I have the sample app pod running. So the simple scenario is completed. But this, of course, is a simple scenario, is not what you actually would do in a normal application. And by the way, let me show you that the application is working. We can check the services to get the IP of the application. And we get the external IP. Let's put it here. And we do have a welcome to YouTube, which is what is written in the homepage of my application. All right, so we have these now. What's the next thing? This works, but I will never use this to deploy in production on any application. So how we can make this better? Well, the next thing to do would be, as someone pointed out before, I guess was Slavčević, we can use environments. So let me go to the environment section, and I'll explain step by step why I'm gonna do this. And let's create something, an environment, we call it AKS dev, for example. We make it of type Kubernetes. And we use, of course, AKS. The thing here is that for some reason, this UI, instead of using the service connections that you already have, require you to basically recreate a new service connection. I'm not sure why. So I need to go and select my my subscription. I only have one cluster in there, so I'm gonna select that, and I'm using the default namespace. I'm creating this, and this will take just a few moments, and we see that we have the KS dev environment, and we have the default namespace mapped here. So we can go back to our pipeline, and let's change a few things over here. First of all, as I mentioned before, this is a deployment, so we should not be using a normal job for it. We should instead be using a deployment job, because deployment jobs are the one that are designed to, handle deployments, as the name says. And also because the normal job would check out our repo, and that will take time for nothing, and we will end up having all the sources also in our deployment agents that we don't need. Also, of course, these requires an environment, and this is why we have created the environment. The environment we created, it's called K8S Dev. And remember, and this is something also I see very often, people forgetting to add the namespace in here. If you go back to environments, you see that we have the K8S Dev, but the resource is actually the namespace, the default namespace in this case. You need to use the environment here with both the name and the namespace you want to deploy into. Otherwise, the deployment will still require the things that we're going to remove now. Being this a deployment job, not a normal job, requires a strategy. Now, I'm not gonna talk too much about the strategy, but basically, thanks to this, you can implement canary, you can implement rolling deployments, but that doesn't really work with Kubernetes very well. If you want to do canary in Kubernetes, you better use the canary deployment that you can find in the deploy here, and that would work. All right, now why I'm using the environment here? For a couple of different reasons. First of all, since we are using the environment, and as I mentioned, and each environment has its own service connection, we can get rid of this service connection over here and this service connection over here, because this task will inherit the service connection from the environment itself. And so this is also better because if you need to change it, you can just change environment. You don't need to change all the recurrence of the service connection inside your tasks. Second thing is that by using the environments, and we will see this in a second, we don't need to go, like I've done just a moment ago, onto the Azure portal to see the deployments, to see the pods, etc. We can see it directly from within Azure DevOps. So we've done this. Let me check my node. We've changed the job to deployment, and we've removed the Kubernetes service credentials from the tasks, using it directly in the environment. So this is my step number 2, and let's just try this out and see what happens. While this build, this will take a moment to to refresh. While this build, I may drink some water because it's 10:11 p.m. but it's still fairly hot. I have 27 degrees Celsius in my room at the moment. I don't have an aircon because if not, it's too noisy for the stream. And while this builds, let me go back to the chat and see if there's anything else. There's Cool Notion asking if it's possible to create a pipeline in Azure DevOps that runs 2 or more independent pipelines and does nothing else. You can do it in 2 ways. You can either use the trigger completion, the pipeline completion trigger, but in that case, it's not the main pipeline that will trigger the other pipelines, but it's the other pipelines, the dependent pipelines, that will check for the execution of the main pipeline, and when it finishes, they will auto kick off themselves, if you will. And you can just say, I don't do anything on the main pipeline and I just use it as a trigger. Or you can, excuse me, you can use a task that is called trigger pipeline task. It's not out of the box. You need to go to the marketplace. There's a couple of tasks, they do basically the same thing. And that would also let you trigger that properly. Or what I mean by properly is that this time will be the main pipeline running that trigger task, and therefore will trigger the other dependent pipelines. But I would say that if you, as you specify here, if you have an application that have independent microservices, and you mentioned that they can be built and deployed separately, but then if you want to deploy them all together, I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing so, because how many times you will need to do that? In theory, maybe once, when you have a greenfield application, because after that you will have your deployment running, and if they are deployable really in independently, you should never be able to, or you should never need to do so. That's my thought. But yeah, definitely you can concatenate pipelines either with the 2 methods I just explained. Our deployment is running and it's actually run. So we will not see any difference in here. In the pods, we will still have 1 pod and with the same age, because nothing changed in the application so far. So that will not change. But what we will see is if we go back to our environments, we can see that now we do have the image deployed. We know what image it is with the tag. We can access the services in our clusters. And if we go inside the workload, we can also see the pods. All of this without leaving Azure DevOps. And so that it doesn't, you don't need, if you're an admin, you don't need to give permission to your users for the Azure portal, because they can see everything from here. If you want to know more about the environments, I do have a video on a series of video actually on the channel about the Azure Pipelines environments or Azure DevOps environments. So check that out if you want to have more information. I have one specifically for Kubernetes. I have others general for environments in general and other things. So let's go back to our pipeline, because there is one more thing that I wanna do here. So far, we've been deploying just the latest image. And if we go back and check our, this is the index. If we go back and check our deployment, you can see that I have one replica and that is hard-coded. And I do not want to hard-code this. And I want to be flexible and I want to have different images. I want to actually deploy only the one and make sure that I deploy the image I just built. So there are a few things I need to change to make that happen. First of all, if I go back, let's remove the latest tag. So we are not going to deploy the latest anymore. And to be even more sure, I want to go to the container registry and in the repository. And let me delete the latest tag. So now we have only one image. All right, so I've deleted the latest tag from here. And what we do first, let's take care of the image name. So if I go back to my deployment over here, you can see that let's use this. So I have this containers section, and this will basically override the container section over here, or at least what we can find in here. What I mean by that is that instead of having now this hard-coded, I want to use this over here. But again, I don't want to hard-code this, so I'm gonna do a few things. First of all, I'm gonna use the variable name because I do have the variable on the top here. So I'm gonna replace this with my image repo variable. And I'm going to also make this a variable, and I'm gonna use it as I'm gonna use it here. I want to have this as stage variable. So let's call it ACR dev URL, and we have these over here. Copy, and again I'm gonna use the variable here. And finally, I'm also gonna use the tag variable. So this one will basically will replace the K8s example acr.azocr.io/sample app that I have in my manifest with basically the same thing, but adding the tag that is automatically generated by the build job over here. So this is what this will do. So let me reselect these and add and reformat. Oops, my bad. There we go. One more. Okay, so this will make sure that I'm going to deploy just the image I want, the image with the tag I want, and not, the latest, because I don't have the latest anymore. The other thing I want to do that I mentioned is I want to get rid of these and make it dynamic. So to make it dynamic, we can tokenize this field or any other field for what matter, and make this dynamic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this with, let's say, replica number. Oops. So I'm going to use this as a token, and you can, and I'll show you in a second, you can use anything you want for as delimiter for the token. One thing don't use something like this. Don't use the percentage for delimiter because YAML doesn't like percentages. So if you do so, it will break basically. So we have this replica number, and now we need to change that. We need to replace that inside the pipeline. To do so, I'm gonna use a task called replace tokens. This is not a task that you can find out of the box. It's a marketplace task that's obviously completely free. And you can find the link for this task also in the video description below if you want to use this. But the way it works is you just take whatever file that is either XML, YAML, or basically any text file you have, and search for tokens and replace the tokens with the environment variables that have the same name. So I created here this replica number token. So what I need to do is create in, again, we can do it over here. We can create an environment variable with the exact same name, and we give it a value, for example, 3. I want to have 3 replicas of that pod. The key here is that it must have the same name. Otherwise, it will not work. So we have now the variable. So what I want to do is tell them to parse my deployment.yaml file and change and replace the tokens. So I'm gonna, if you remember, we were saving the manifests in here. Oh, actually, I can grab these. And, oops, my bad. So the root directory will be where we have our manifest. The target file or files will be my deployment YAML. We can leave everything else like it is, but I want to change the prefix and suffix for the token because in my case I just use that thing. I don't remember the name. The sharp, like in C sharp, right? And that's all it takes. I'm gonna insert it before the deployment task, and there it is. Let's give it a proper name. Let's call it display name, replace token. And here we have it. What else? Yeah, so what we've done is we've tokenized the replica number in here, and we've told our pipeline to replace that with the replica number here, which now is 3. And we also we replaced the container in the manifest file. So we are going to use the exact version of the image that we are building. Where is it? Over here. Let me save these. These of course will kick off the pipeline. So I'm gonna cancel it because I need to why is it so slow today? I need to push to the remote repo my manifest. Wow, this is slow. This is really slow. I'm not actually sure why it is this slow. Hopefully I'm not having network problems. That would be bad. All right, so let me go here and let's cancel this out. I'm canceling this because, as I mentioned, I need to still running. Why is it still running? Okay, it's being canceled. All right. I need to commit this, and I also want to change my my file over here, and let's say welcome to CoderDave. So I do have to commit this. I'm a CLI guy, so I'm gonna do this from the terminal over here. Remember to always add a comment, so the comment will be changed manifest and index. And let's push it to our remote repo. When you do that, normally, oh, of course, I need to pull it first. You normally don't try to push directly to the main branch. It's not what you should do, but for the sake of the demo and the sake of time, I will do that. All right, now we have our deployment with the replica number on the remote, in theory. So let's just double check. Yeah, we have the change manifest and index. So now we can go back and wait for our pipeline. Let me see if there's anything. This is a very interesting question. What if we put the build and deploy in separate pipelines? What is your suggestion for sharing the image tag? I would not recommend doing that, especially with the YAML pipelines, because basically you don't need to. You have here all you need and all you want to have a single pipeline. If you are concerned, for example, if you have multiple environments that you need to deploy to, let's say you have dev, test, QA, etc. So you're concerned that your pipeline will become too long or too big, your YAML file, then split it up in templates, but use the same pipeline. It's much more efficient. I wouldn't see basically a single reason why you would want to split YAML pipelines between deployment and build. But even if you want to do so, the only way you have to share the image tag is, let me think. I guess it's using the APIs. So I don't remember if the trigger task I mentioned before, if you can share a payload, for example, and consume that as an input, but no, I don't think you can. You can share that with, if you use a release pipeline. So if instead of deploying through YAML, you decide to deploy using a release pipeline, so a classic pipeline, then you can get, in my case, for example, the tag is the build ID, so you can get the build ID from the calling pipeline. But if you use any other tag, then it will not be possible to share that as well. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. And plus, if you use the release pipelines, you don't have access to the environment's goodness that you have over here. So yeah, I wouldn't do that. So this is deploying. Let's see if we can, let me clear these up. Let's try and watch these. We still have only one thing running, and thing I mean pod. And now you can see that we are having a error for some reason. This is interesting. Let me double check the execution of the pipeline. So we have the replace tokens. We see that we have replaced the token, so that should have worked. Oh no, this is the other one terminating. But I'm not sure why we only have one pod. Oh no, in fact we have no, my bad. We have 3 pods. Of course, each pod is only one pod, one container each. So yeah, that's all right. So we do have the 3 pods right now because we've replaced it in here in the manifest/deployment YAML, and we now have 3 replicas. So that has worked. And in fact, we can go back here to our environment. And in here, we can also double check that we do have 3 pods and all 3 are available with the image, this time 157, because we can see over here, this was the build 157. And we do have, if I scroll down, should be here somewhere. Where is the, there we go. It's been tagged with the 157. So yeah, that's it, I guess. If, as I mentioned before, if you want to check this pipeline out, you have this full YAML pipeline inside the repo, and you can play with that if you want. You can grab the whole content, and as I mentioned, you have everything over here, everything we've done. So if I go back and take a look at the pipeline, just for summary, we can see all we've done. And we started from a simple scenario, which, as I mentioned, is not the one I would normally recommend to deploy anywhere. That is not just a test environment. And we grew, we changed our pipeline up to reach a point in which I would feel confident to use these in a production deployment. If you know me, you know that I would actually not use this approach necessarily. I would do something different, but I will leave that to another video. I actually do have another video, but that is more to do on how I like to build my container images and how I like to use that then for deploying across different environments. But for a normal scenario, even a production scenario, this is more than enough. We have our build of the image. We use parameters to change to use the name for the tag and so on and so forth. We publish the Kubernetes manifests, the YAML files, as artifacts. So our deployment job doesn't have to access the repo. It's never a good idea for deployment's job to access the repo. And then we take that and we do we download in a deployment job. We use a deployment job so we can access the environments. So we have all the goodness we've seen, and we download the artifacts so we can use the Kubernetes manifest for deployment. We go and create the secret that it's used for pulling the image from our Azure Container Registry, and this is needed, and we do it in a separate task, so if it fails, we don't waste time in doing anything else, because this anyway will not work. We parameterize our manifest files so we can use variables, for example, for the replica numbers, but you can parameterize anything else. And finally, we deploy using our manifests. So this is what we have done today. Thank you very much, Italian Fanart, for the super chat. Said very good job, Dave. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the super chat. Yeah, that's basically it. Let's see. If you have any other question, feel free to ask now. I will still be up a couple of minutes. If you guys want to say anything, want to have any answer to any question, feel free to ask now. And I'll drink some water in the meantime. And I really hope this has been valuable. I know I started quite slowly. I started from the very beginning, but this was the aim for this video, to start from scratch. Slavčević says, thanks for this, great job. Thank you for your compliments. And yeah, I really hope this was helpful. Also, Zubair saying, thank you very much, Dave. You're very welcome, and thanks for staying until the end. I really appreciate that. As I mentioned at the beginning, go and check out the Dev2 blogging platform. You can also find the link in the video description. We are about to cross the 100,000 views on my articles, so thanks for that. And I know that some of you also follow me there, so again, thank you. And last but not least, as I mentioned at the beginning, I've sent the newsletter, the monthly newsletter. Some people may have not received it, or they have received it but in the spam, because the newsletter provider told me that they changed the IP addresses and they are still in warm-up mode. So if you are subscribed and you haven't received the email of the newsletter, check in your spam folder or your junk folder, and it may be there. Just whitelist it, so should not go in the spam anymore. For the other ones, if you're not subscribed, go to coderdave.io/newsletter and subscribe if you like to have the newsletter send to you, and I will resend tomorrow probably the newsletter to all the new subscribers and to the people that I see that haven't received it. So I guess that's it. That's it for me. School of Notion said, thank you, Dave. Again, thank you to all of you to stick around until the end of this streaming. And I guess there's no questions, but if there will be any other question in the future, just feel free to use the comment section of this video or any other video for what matters. And if you want to be part of the CoderDave community or the extended community, DevOps community, go and check out, again, in the video description, there is a link to my Discord server. We have a bunch of people there. We talk about DevOps, we talk about GitHub, we talk about Azure DevOps, there's Q&A, and so on and so forth. So if you want to be part of that, just feel free to join. With this said, I think I'm gonna close the stream. I thank you again all for being here tonight with me, or today, I'm not sure where you are. And I hope to see you all soon on the channel. Bye.